Hello, everybody. Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello. All right. Here I am. Sorry about the slow webcam. It's very strange. It's not the best webcam because we just have money going other places in Beverly Hills. Anyways, I'm drinking some good old-fashioned soy beverage from Trader Joe's. You know the drill. And what we have going is something really tremendously fab. And I want to start this video off by saying, all you men, it is a tough world, okay? And that's okay, because this quote is a proverb, and it's for you, world of men. The greatest profession of man is finding his way back to himself, all right? Hi. Let's see. Men are very restless. They can't get any sleep at night because they're worried about what they're going to do for a living. And they don't know if... Sorry, the webcam's going. Like, it freezes up. They don't know if life is going to treat them bad, and they're going to be unable to earn a living. And so they're concerned because a lot of society depends on men. Even though women have come very far, women still would like men to take the front seat and do it as a gentleman. And sorry, see, it's slow again. And you know, like a feminist movement, we need a masculinist movement, and that's what Social Alchemy Project is going toward in your transcendence as a man. And in your evolutionary phases, you're going to find different stages of your life that you're going to relate to me, and sometimes you won't relate to me. Sometimes you'll relate to other people, and you might swing back over to me, or you might just throw me away altogether. So all you men, the real profession, before you go out and work on your career, the real profession, education, no education, work history, no work history, young or old, rich or poor. Your true profession is you men finding your way back to you. And whatever that is, it's exciting. And it's going to be a lot of work, a lot of trial and error. So when you go online, at least it's been like this in the last 2 decades, 20 years, if you go online and do a search under men's movement, you may find a lot of men so sorry, it keeps freezing up. This frozen picture. Please forgive me. I don't know why Microsoft is really doing this. Anyways, I hope throughout the remainder of the video and the duration of my talk, you're not going to have it frozen. Because I'm trying to give you information that's really something that piques women's interests as well as men's interests. Now, we have a culture where women know everything, right? And, you know, women want you to stand by them, and we have stood by them for sexual assault recovery and prevention, you know, working against rape and domestic violence for women. And so women really have their opinion of men. And I want men to really settle in with men. And, you know, women settle in with women in a boutique culture of nails and fragrance and skin at Sephora. And men don't really have anything other than jock-itch medicine and maybe cufflinks and NFL and maybe politics, okay? And NASCAR and drinking beer. So check backup disk space. The disk that your backup is saved on doesn't have enough free space. I know this. Okay, so if you rewind, when you go and do a search online under men's movement, you're going to find some things having to do with a lot of bitterness when you hear men talk about their men's movement and their masculinity and things like that. And that comes from years and years of men being sent to prison and losing custody over the kids, losing the deed, losing the title, leaving them with nothing. And then when they get out of prison, they don't have a car, they don't have a house, and are homeless. And they may peddle the streets and panhandle, or they might learn to sell, you know, drugs in the black market. And so men really are hurting, like America is hurting and broken, having a president that grabs pussy and hires a prostitute, and that leader being supported by evangelicals. But if you do a rewind with Bill Clinton, it just doesn't compare to Bill Clinton getting a hard-on and getting a blowjob. Let's just be really frank, men, all right? Now, if you're 18 years or older, you need to turn off this, because we're talking about some really important stuff having to do with the sociology of men, where everything is fleeting and everything is temporal and transitory. So a lot of men have learned very quickly that the things that they pioneered for their families doesn't exist, doesn't seem to be anything they own. Now, women put men in that position more than men put women at that position. And I'm talking economics. I'm not talking about other issues about abandonment and not being affectionate and things like that. We're not talking at that level. We're talking about masculinity and the men's movement and cock and power and all those things that are figured into why man is so powerful as a phallic symbol, like the Twin Towers or planes or the flagpole. Everything is like erect, almost like in the counterproductive way, where, you know, we have to articulate this. And so we want to really come out in men's psychology and, you know, lost sons and absent fathers, and even raising a boy to be a man, to be Superman in a household with just a woman with no husband or no father. So women are very important, but let's put that aside, okay, and look at what we're talking about as a men's movement. Now, I was out of town and I visited a Christian, and we were watching a film, and I kept saying, shut up, because she kept walking around saying how bad the profanity was. And I kept saying, shut up, shut up. And finally, she just attacked me with her nails. And later on, she told me she pinched me. I said, you gouged at me and you lashed at me with your nails. And it actually drew blood. Then she said to me, because I was yelling, she says, I can call the police. I'm going to call the police. And I said, no. I can call the police because you just laid a hand on me. And she was completely non-cognizant of that. Okay, now, if it was a different gender, I mean, it would get him locked up in jail immediately. So men have learned not to put a hand on women, but women seem to think that they can get away with putting a hand on men. And I just want to show you kind of what happened while I was telling this Christian. See, that's one of the nails. And then I think the other one might be, oh, like right here. Okay, so these are really bad. This is like from 4 days ago. Okay, so it was kind of getting infected and things like that. And I had to really, you know, try to get this to go down. And so now you're kind of seeing it where it's not such a bad, you know, visible thing where it's an eyesore. But the evening after this had happened, I then went to a men's panel on the Me Too movement. And so it was all about, the DA was there, the district attorney, and a man that's running a masculinity program at a school. Well, it's actually Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And I did work many years ago at the SARP Center, Sexual Assault Recovery and Prevention Center. And I marched down the street in high heels to say with signs, you know, we support the movement of, you know, rape against women. And us men are standing by women to end rape and domestic violence and things like that. And so I just can't really wrap my mind around that a woman thinks she can get away with this. But we have to be really careful, men. If you've been taken away from your children, or you've lost everything, and or you're bitter now, you know, or she's been violent to you, like in my situation, we really have to rid ourselves of bitterness when we're talking about a men's movement. And we have to really promote a wholeness of ourselves. So I also kind of wanted to share a little something else that had happened. Let me get my information here. I'm going to put my sweater back on. It's like a little sweater I have. It's kind of cute and everything. Okay, so I'm going to kind of explain also another thing that's happened in the last couple of months as well. I've been dealing with women that think they can get away with abusing men. And women are very angry. If they can't be perfect, they need more validation and they need more attention. If they don't like their hair or their weight or what they're wearing that evening, they need the man's validation. Very rarely men are saying, how's my hair? How's my figure? You know, men aren't really seeking that type of validation. They're just kind of like chill. And that's what makes a man so marvelous in his masculinity, his psychological masculinity, mind you, is that he's chill, he's cool, he's unmovable, and, you know, she can bitch and nag all she wants. But at some point, he's going to call her a cunt. Because that harassing can really be high maintenance for the man to calm her down. And so men have come up with a terminology in the gay community. It's called ditch the bitch and make the switch. Now, you know, if you're a woman, you can if you're worried about the webcam freezing again, and if you don't like that, that's tough, okay? And if you're 18 years old, you need to turn this video off. So I want to say that these terms can be derogatory on women. And very rarely the man is thinking that he needs to apologize because she's so offended that she was called a C-U-N-T. And a C-U-N-T is a woman that has crossed the threshold of being a bitch. And she's no longer a bitch anymore. She's just solidly stuck in this evil mindset of being critical and holding things over men's head and letting them know that they are not living up to the standard and the status quo and the norm, which is brought out by the women being beautiful, knowing how to design, knowing how to shop. Now, I'm all of the above because I have a feminine side and have always been a feminist. But now that I'm getting abused by women physically, I'm learning that I need to really stand up with you men in what I am calling an agreeable or agreed men's movement standard, because there's not a standard we have in a men's movement across the board. And I want us men to think that that's something that we need as far as eliminating the bitterness and finding our central core so that we can love our wives and we can understand them. And when they're freaking out, we can just like place distance and don't tell them to shut up or yell at them like I did because it got me physically abused, which I could have put her behind bars. I know my rights. So, that being stated, I, after the abuse, went to this, it's called Men's Place in the Men's Movement. And, you know, we want to take part in a discussion with local men who are working to make San Luis Obispo County. Now, I live in LA, but this is the Central Coast, and I used to be Downtown Brown, the community bear mascot of San Luis Obispo. That's where I discovered methamphetamines. That's where I had a run with the law. That's where I also got a 4.0 in criminal justice and decided to go and get my master's in public administration with an emphasis in government and policy. It's also an area where I was diagnosed bipolar as well, and that affected a lot of factors and moving parts in my life that were really despairingly halted through a society that I felt was not accepting me in a very white Reaganomics town as San Luis Obispo. Now, San Luis Obispo, I wanted to explain, is where Fred Astaire's family had settled, and it's also where San Luis Obispo County, where some other celebrities have made their home, like Gene Kelly and the Hearst Castle and Charlie Chaplin and Marion Davies. And there's a theater in Pismo Beach where Clark Gable and Joan Crawford had performed. It's now a police station in Pismo Beach, but it used to be like the Pismo Beach Opera House. I used to perform there. And also, I performed at Cuesta College. It's a city college in San Luis Obispo in the Interact Theater, and Glenn Close said I was the funniest one in the play because I was in the musical play with her nephew, Danny. So the panel discussions for this men's topic in a very white Reaganomics town that's really not a reality. It's like a bubble. It's like a Disneyland for college students. And it's really an ideal place for people to, you know, begin their college education. And Cal Poly San Luis Obispo is very famous in agriculture, very famous in engineering and architecture. And so there was a history in the last 20 years where there were some rapes to women. And the work that I was doing before this happened in San Luis Obispo, because there's been progress, obviously, I was working as a crisis intervention counselor, and I was also getting women assigned into the women's shelter. This all sounds really fabulous and everything. The problem with this is back then, And even to this day, they had to be very discretionary of how they put these red hands on the campus where the rapes occurred, because wealthy Caucasian white people have been calling the university and saying, we don't want our kids to see this. We don't want to see this when we're going to check out the campus to see if we want our child to go to the school when she or he graduates from high school. So there was a period where the university had those hands taken off, and then women pulled back in to promote some of their not feminist or women's lib, but the protection of women's rights. And so they created the vagina monologues performances there in San Luis Obispo as well. So fast forward, we have this men's panel, and here I am getting slapped by a woman in this county because I said, shut the fuck up and sit down and listen to the smoothie. And she was a Christian, and she was freaking out about the language. So us men, we find that there is this dichotomy. There is this right and wrong. There's this yin and yang. And us men have to admit that we're wrong. Well, you know, women need to admit they're wrong as well, too. It's a two-way street. And one of the things that this was initiating was that men need to shut up and sit down and admit that they can be, and they can be willing to be wrong, kind of thing. And that was what the director of the RISE Center, her name is Jennifer Adams, and she remembers me years ago when I was doing work there. But so many notes. The organization is no longer called SARP. It had morphed into RISE. And SARP was called the Sexual Assault Recovery and Prevention Center for women that were standing up against domestic violence, human trafficking, helping out with victim witness because of the Victims Bill of Rights Act of 2008, the exploitation of children and a multidisciplinary response to the commercial sex of children. This falls under human sex trafficking. So it segued into even children, okay, and giving them rights, and they need to be protected. You know, help for victims and witnesses of crime. So what happened is the Sexual Assault Recovery and Prevention Center morphed into RISE, which is like respect, integrity, something, empowerment, something, something, something. Well, what I was saying earlier is a couple months prior to this, I was staying at somebody's home in San Luis Obispo County, and there was a peeping Tom, and she peeping Tom'd me. Now, when we tell men about this, they kind of laugh to themselves, even women. But then when they see I have a straight face, they're like, oh my God, you're serious? I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm like, man, that's really terrible. I'm like, I know. So I had a notice of court hearing. I supply all these papers. I served them through the sheriff's department. And it just was really intense because I said to the judge, I said, here you go. I said to the judge, Your Honor, I says, I don't want an ankle bracelet on this person. I'm not looking at, incarceration. I'm not looking at us to do some type of, money exchange, for my justice. I need money. I says, I just simply want her to get some counseling for at least 6 months or probation or something. And I says, Your Honor, I says, I don't want to walk out of here empty-handed. And what I did is I walked out empty-handed because there wasn't enough evidence. Well, I brought a woman that had been told by another neighbor that this neighbor, that Peeping Tom's people, does it to other people. I also gave some names, and I was willing to give phone numbers as well to show that that other people in the neighborhood were validating the crime that she has propensity to do. This is a letter from one of the neighbors. And she just said, this is a crazy neighbor. People have said bad things about her. This is the form I filled out. And so I felt like one of the women whose case falls through the cracks of the criminal justice system because there's not enough evidence. So, fast forward a couple of months, just recently, these marks, a woman's like doing this to me. So I'm dealing with a perpetrator loitering, invasion of my space, disturbing the peace, trespassing, and under the sheriff's department website, it says her name, the address of the perpetrator, and then it says peeping, and then underneath, under description, it says assault. And I said to the judge, I said, you know, we have a police report. And he said that the sheriff is wrong. The judge said that the sheriff's report was wrong, which was completely inaccurate. Now, I remember seeing many years ago, early in the morning, I was driving, and I saw a bumper sticker in front of me on the car, and it said, the judge is the most guilty. And also, I know I've met attorneys around prostitution and cocaine. So, you know, when you place a police report, because a woman is abusing you men, you need evidence, okay? Because it's very difficult to get these restraining orders granted. Now, so this woman is just lashing at me with her nails, and a peeping Tom woman gets away with this too. So there's like 2 crimes put against me. And I didn't go to the police to report this, because I'm not about being the karma police or putting handcuffs on people's eyes, or their hands. But when somebody lays a hand on you, I have a problem with that. Now, in this county, there has been some issues about women not apologizing. I know the mayor, her name is Heidi Harmon. Years ago, she engaged in a friendship with me, but I was so preoccupied with what I needed to do with my career, I wasn't able to engage in a friendship with her. So, this is her, and an article comes out. She's a very powerful woman. She has a very big focus on climate control, and she's amazing, educated and fab, very well read. Mayor Harmon not shying away or apologizing as a woman in power. What if you had a man's name on there and said not shying away or apologizing for a man in power? That would not be politically correct, right? And a lot of women would be upset. But women are coming out with these articles, which, more power to them. But there is an imbalance that's happening for us men, and there needs to be an agreed standard on where we are going with a men's movement. Now, there's also another article that came out when I was in San Luis Obispo last month. It could have come out this month, actually, in January. And it was talking about protesters march at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo University against officials' handling of sexual assault. The women were not very much so received, they felt, by the police. You see the thing I wrote on top, agreed men's movement standard. We want, from out of this notification, we want to see, how do us men come together, because we're not necessarily getting the best reception from the DA or what have you, like I went through. So us men want to really look very seriously at direct services and parent education, social justice education around men, telling women, you can't do this to us, and really guaranteeing accountability for all you men and protecting your confidentiality and having that agreed men's movement standard for men who are mentally ill, men who are gay, men who are bi-curious, and they're very unsettled with their marriage. And we want to keep the wedding and the vows that were given to these heterosexual couples, of high priority. And I encourage men to stay with their wives. But, I go in bars in the Castro, I'm finding priests. Okay, and I'm finding also straight men who are married. So men are reaching out. Okay, and there's this really important point that I'm making, is that you men need to be very strong on exposing women who have physically assaulted you, have hurt you physically, and men that have been abused by these women. Because as men, we have to be advocates for women. Duh. I'm not saying don't do the Me Too movement to support men that help women, because that's what this was about. It wasn't about, oh, I too have been raped, or, you know, they mentioned just a little bit of violence against men. That was only once, but the whole criteria of it was really overseen by a woman. And that's why I have a problem with this. I'd like to see it overseen by a man. And I'd like us men to come together and advocate for us men and not misrepresent one another. And we men have been unlawfully demolished, emasculated, and thrown away and criminalized, especially if you're not making money. I have met so many women that have said, I divorced my husband because he lost his job. I says, well, weren't you guys in love? Well, he lost his job. And she divorced him. Wow. So, you know, it's very fatal, people, that we are coming together as men, you know, during a Trump administration. Right now the government is shut down. It's called a Trump shutdown. All the assaults that he's done against women, you know, us men, we have a what? We have a men's role. Very important. By the way, Tom Petty died the other day of overdose of opioids, which is opium, which is heroin, as well as prescription drugs and Oxycontin. The question is, where do men fit in among the Me Too movement? Now, that was what that advertisement was, right? The Me Too movement. But why are men asking where they need to fit in a Me Too movement that supports women? Why can't, we've already discussed that for the last 20 years. Hence my work that I've done at the SARP Center, the Sexual Assault Recovery Prevention Center, as well as the Women's Shelter. Why are men in 2018 asking where they are in the men's movement? If there is a place for them in the men's movement, what's their role? We should know their role, right, us men? And, you know, panel discussions are good, but they don't have to be entrusted only by a woman's administrative work and getting that up and going. Now, there was a man that showed up to RISE, the organization that put on the men's panel, you know, the Me Too movement, put it on in San Luis Obispo, the men's panel that I went to the day after I had this happen to me. And I covered my arms. I was embarrassed and ashamed that a woman had did this to me. But, you know, in this hysteria that women have gone through, us men have a very broken fault line among ourselves. And the sex that we participate in is angry sex. And we know that with one another. You know, when you get a nagging woman out of the room and you get two men together, it's total pig sex. Underground. I'm talking San Francisco. I have seen, and you have maybe seen, a lot of different behaviors that are really concerning that would create a slow panel, San Luis Obispo discussion, men's role in the Me Too movement. But why are we questioning where we are or who we are and what place we have in the men's movement? We should already have our place set because of the last 2 decades. What else would I share with you? You know, this is really about real men, real depression, and where real healing occurs. When men come to you gay men, it doesn't mean you guys have to have sex. Counseling, 24-hour crisis, legal services, outreach and education, you know, extending our voice and our stories forward. Why do people show support and respect for those men that have money because of lying? Us men are done with it, aren't we? Don't we want to stop lying about our money where it attracts women or male hustlers in the gay community, right? They're looking for sugar daddy. Why are we allowing women to be vicious about us and to show disrespect during a Trump's betrayal of us men? Why are we in this position? It's because men have not been liberated. Men have not become empowered by the woman's voice. And we all sit around thinking we have to wait for the women's voice. You don't. So rewind. I'm doing rewind and fast forward through this whole entire video. What happened is that Jennifer Adams, the director of Rise, she said, here's Rise, so you have it in your minds. How to rise to action. This used to be called the SARP Center, the Sexual Recovery Prevention Center. It has this whole thing about upstander intervention guide. What's an upstander? It's somebody who's not a bystander kind of thing. And it's basically talking about working against harassment. It's very wonderful, but I like something that's a little bit more upfront of like sexual assault, full on. But the Rise is very good. It's very good because it's attracting the turnover of the students in a college-age town. That's just a total ridiculous place for white people that have money. So, but Jennifer Adams, she said at the men's panel representing Rise, this man, she introduced a man, and she said, this man came to me a while ago and said, I want to teach martial arts, self-defense to women. And she said, sit down. So he sat down, being a really cool dude, right? That's the guy, right? But she took control, right? And I kind of think men are tired of that. So she said to the audience at the men's panel, she says, I told him to do this, and if it wasn't for him being willing to be wrong, there would not be a men's panel tonight. So everybody congratulated the man because the woman basically set him right and put him on the right path, and he was willing to be wrong. Wait a minute. He was never wrong. He simply wanted to teach self-defense to women. But in her mind, she said, you're wrong. This is not where we're going. This is what we want. If you want to help, we can do this. And as far as I'm concerned, to this day, although he created a men's panel through the Rise organization in San Luis Obispo, he's still not allowed to teach self-defense. Now, I have a problem with that. Men. In the men's place in the Me Too movement. You know what? Your place, men, are in the men's movement itself, all right? The men's movement is not a Me Too movement where me too, I want to be included in standing up for women. That's the Me Too movement. The men's movement is applicable nonetheless because we're looking at how we can address these issues of the men beyond a Me Too movement. And so I want us all to really be in contemplative thought about the agreed men's movement standard, where we're not coming from a place of bitterness, and we're not coming from a place of being shamed because of our endowments, or being told we're wrong for wanting to teach martial arts or self-defense to women. Being willing to be wrong. Women need to be willing to be wrong as well. And that's not being advocated. It's 2018. I understand protesters that are all women are marching at Cal Poly against officials' handling of sexual assault that was completely not satisfactory to the women. And who are right behind the women? The Me Too movement, which is fab, right? But there is not an ethical, welcoming collective consciousness of us men gathering together with gay straight alliance of men and saying, this is our men's movement. To reduce STDs, to talk about human sex trafficking, to talk about female abusers, to talk about how women have oppressed women as well, or women have oppressed men. So I want men to really be on their guard and be willing to be right. I want you men to be willing to be right. And I have heard many women, well, actually several, not many, but several, laugh about men's penis size. I've seen commercials on YouTube about women overlooking urinals in a men's bathroom and looking down and laughing. Oh, you're so small. If men were going around saying her breasts are small, or her, he would be considered a misogynist, a sexist, a woman hater. These women are going to come forward. They're already doing it, and they're saying we're not men haters. But I want you to listen to the language that's being used and listen to how a men's movement is being controlled by what women approve at a men's panel, at a Rise Center. I want men to be able to have their own agency, regardless of women being staffed, regardless of a woman being director. I mean, I go into these organizations and I see 98% staffed by women, okay? And then you come up with the Me Too movement, which is fab. But men, your leaders, your public administrators, your educators, your victims of abuse that gay men have done to you because they've sodomized you, or women. I would love to hear your stories. And to really, in this ethical welcoming collective consciousness, help men to know how to gather their evidence so they can get their restraining orders from peeping toms. They can go ahead and do well for themselves, because they don't have to be validated by women. They don't have to be told they are right by women. They don't have to be told when they're wrong by women. That's what's happening in these Me Too movements. And people, excuse me, I had to wipe my nose. People, it's not fair. It's so obvious to see when you have a guy friend that's talking about his old lady, okay, or the wife. And you can correct them. Hey, you know, she's not the wife. She's your wife. You know, us men, we can hold each other accountable and responsible on how we do love our wives. But men, how do we love our gay men as well? And how do we love our men's stories? So this creates a mass disaster for men if we are going to not permit ourselves to be empowered. I'm not going to ask you where is your place in the men's movement. Your place in the men's movement right now is you sitting in your chair or your car seat listening to me right now. You're in the right place at the right time for who you are and what you are and where you've been and where you're going, and you might not get there until 15 years is up. Because you have a social responsibility in the social alchemy, the social transformation, and the access management of that, knowing how to access transcendence and social transformative growth in the middle of the abuse and say, whoa, whew, I don't need this peeping Tom. Whoa, I shouldn't have told her to shut up. I should have known her limits because this is what she did to me. So these women will pull hair. These women will scratch. They say it's pinching. No, they'll scratch. They'll dig their hands into your body. At nighttime, they will even take scissors and cut off your gonads, your genitals. Even in a anti-circumcision movement of men, women mostly in a modern contemporary society make the decisions of if they want their sons to be not castrated, if they want to be circumcised before the husband even gives a yay or nay in the hospital. So women, be willing to be wrong with us, because we are willing to be right. And if we want to teach self-defense to women, we are not wrong. We'll provide your men's panel women, but we want to give and contribute in a cooperative approach with stakeholders, with sponsors, with organizations, with your district attorney or DA, with your judge, with your attorney, with homeless people. Who cares about a men's movement if you don't even include homeless men? That's a big point that is not going to be included in this hashtag #MeToo movement. In an agreed men's movement standard, we do include the homeless generation. We include men that are raped in prison by men. Those are the advocates that are working against that, not women. Women have taken the front seat on showing their fierceness, their tenacity to bring justice and to create the movement. But men, if you need women to ask you where your place is, say, I already have my place. It's right here. Your men's movement, gentlemen, is a men's movement. It's not gender specific to women's movement. It's a men's movement, okay? You have a right, men, to go ahead and meet with other men that have been abused by women, that have been told that they are wrong by women, that have heard women bitch at them to keep men feeling like they're worthy to be working their asses off to keep the woman being beautiful. Men come to me, and that's their bitterness. That's their fear of being homeless. The whole encompassing aspect of a men's movement doesn't just look at sexual assault against women. It looks about the sexual assault against on men. So men, share your stories. Come from a place of love. Love is unity, and unity is the virtue. And we need to do this, as I say, as an ethical, welcoming, collective consciousness. To say, women, the American dream is a myth. The American dream is a nightmare for us men. We don't want to afford it. We don't want to have to pay for it. We don't want to be married. We want a divorce. The woman is the one that's always getting the divorce. Very rarely you hear a man that says, she abused me, I want a divorce, and she needs to be incarcerated. And these cases are out there, and they are falling through the criminal justice system. And they promote you right now in your heart center to do an honest inventory and say, wait, hey, I am the movement because I have these feelings, and this is where we're at, and that's our place. And we can begin dialogue. We can begin talks, conversations that don't have to be limited to a director creating a men's place in the Me Too movement men's panel. It's great what Jennifer Adams is doing, but she needs to be willing to be wrong too. And she's dealing with red tape. She's dealing with fundraising. She's dealing with assistance and grants. And she has to be very white and black. Okay? She has to be very specific of what she's providing in the RISE organization, such as this. Men, what you provide is you provide heart and story. And that, gentlemen, is the communication that women have always wanted. And it's the communication us gay men want men to be engaged with, because it's healing the psychological damage and the loss of psychological masculinity as men that feel they've been ran over by women. And it's been really tough for men to raise their hand in a marriage without the woman saying, you're sexist, you're trying to control me. And yet she is totally bashing him. So you women, hold yourselves accountable with other women. Us men, we have our place. What's that place? It doesn't have to be your business, women. Not everything has to become the woman's business. And in our society of civil rights and getting the women to vote that didn't have the luxury to vote for a president, and what women have done to end sexual assault and to create recovery and prevention and to end rape and to end economic control and sexism, it goes two ways, men. So, I love you. Be empowered to be you.